What is going on, guys? So the Space Force is officially official, and it has its first member, General John Raymond. So as of right now, the Space Force is composed of literally just one person, which is kind of crazy to think about, even though it's not really that different. It's just like, we have a person now to say that they're a part of the Space Force. But the Space Force is officially a thing. And I know there's actually some of you curious out there that are thinking, the Space Force, that sounds pretty cool. Maybe I was thinking of joining the Air Force. Maybe one day I'll join the Space Force. So when will you be able to join the Space Force, and how are you going to be able to do that? Okay, so before I go into those two things, there's a couple things that I have to kind of lay out for you guys, because making the Space Force its own official sixth branch of the military, which is going to reside under the Air Force, kind of like how the Marines are under the Navy. So the Space Force is basically within the Air Force. So it is a sixth complete branch of the military, but it just resides under the Air Force. So I guess eventually one day, you're going to see Space Force recruiting offices and stuff. Just like you see regular recruiting offices, you're one day going to see Space Force recruiting offices, which is just so crazy to think about, because it wasn't long ago at all when President Trump just talked about the Space Force, and he even said he kind of thought of it initially as a joke, and then he was like, wait a minute, that's a good idea, let's do that. And then what do you know, a year, 2 years later, we have the Space Force. Literally crazy to think about. But it's been a really long time since we've actually opened up another whole branch of the military. It's been like 70 years since the Air Force has been a thing. And to put things into perspective, they said that it took the Air Force 3 years to really kind of get up and running. So it took 3 years for the Air Force to get up and running back whenever it was initially created as a branch. And their goal is to have the Space Force be up and running in 18 months. But that doesn't mean, you're gonna go to a recruiter's office and you're gonna sign in and swear in to join the Space Force in 18 months. That's not really what that means. What that means is they're gonna have some kind of structure, operational capabilities, and kind of more of a direct vision on what they're wanting to do. Now, what is it that the Space Force is supposed to do? So their mission is directly from them to organize, train, and equip space forces in order to protect U.S. and allied interests in space and to provide space capabilities to joint forces. Okay, so basically what that means is the Space Force's mission is to protect our stuff in space, essentially. And that's honestly really, really important. One of the reasons that, for example, with connecting things to the Army, that we still do land navigation with pen and paper is because, let's say GPS cuts out, let's say something bad happens and you can't use your little dagger, which a dagger is literally kind of like a handheld device that's about as big as a smart TI calculator or whatever. You type in the coordinates and then you just follow the arrow where it tells you to go. But let's say you don't have that. Well, we're still training soldiers on paper land navigation. Well, if somebody shoots down our satellites in space, that would be when we need to do that. But we need to protect those assets, and that's kind of like going to be the focus of the Space Force. Now, currently the plan for the total number of Space Force cadets, soldiers, I don't know really what we're going to call these people. You have your soldiers, your Marines, your airmen, all that stuff. What are we going to call Space Force people? I don't think they've really came up with anything yet besides space cadets, but that's just, I hope they don't really just call them space cadets or something. That would be just really crazy. But anyway, so the Space Force is supposed to accumulate 16,000 Space Force members, enlisted and officer, as well as contracting people. So it's not actually going to be 16,000 people in the military. There's actually going to be contractors who are going to make up that 16,000. But you're going to see that kind of like through articles and stuff, which will be linked down in the description. But that's not actually going to be how big it is. It's basically saying, hey, all 16,000 of you that are in the Air Force right now, that are in the Space Command, which actually, never mind, I don't need to do that because there's actually a Space Command under the Air Force and all that stuff right now. But all 16,000 of you that worked with the Space Command, you have the option to switch over and move over to the Space Force. So we're kind of like assigning you over there. You don't have to go to the Space Force, but we really want you to go to the Space Force. And so that's how that's gonna work out. So it's not gonna be all 16,000 people strong immediately right away. It's going to kind of trickle over, kind of like how, when the Army came out with their cyber branch in 2016, They basically took people from different MOSs in the Army, and they were like, hey, you know, all of you, we would like for you to go over to the cyber branch of the military. That would be really great. So if you're looking to enlist into the military or commission into the military as an officer, you know, straight out of the gate going into the Space Force, that's not going to happen anytime soon. It's going to be several years before that actually happens. I'll throw a ballpark in there, around 3 to 4 years before people really start initially entering into the Space Force. Because initially all this stuff that's going to happen is they're taking all the space people from the Air Force and they're switching them over to the Space Force, and then they're going to go through the Army, the Navy, and the Marines, and all the people that are connected to the Space Command and them, they're going to then try to switch them over to the Space Force. And then ultimately, after all of that is done, and we've kind of switched over everybody that we can, and they're going to try and kind of build out a chain of command, so you're not going to have any like E4s or even probably any E5s and below in the Space Force for several years. But until they build out that chain of command and that leadership, you're not going to end up initially joining into the military as a Space Force member. But once they do that, then you will actually see recruiting stations pop up. You'll probably see on the news, hey, people are starting to recruit into the Space Force, and that'll be a whole big thing. But again, ballpark 3 to 4 years from now. So ultimately, if you are actually really curious about joining the Space Force and that's something that you want to do, then your best bet right now would be to join the Air Force into an MOS that is going to tailor you towards being part of that Space Command, and then being able to switch over at a later date. Because again, if you're joining right now, you could join into an MOS in the Air Force and then not be able to switch over because you're going to be just frankly too low of a rank right now to be able to make that switch, because they're going to be building up all of their officers, they're going to be building up all of their NCOs before they take over people who are actually lower enlisted soldiers or airmen or seamen or whatever. So for all of you out there that are really hoping to join the Space Force now that it was officially a thing and it officially has its first officer, you don't hold your breath, because it's going to be a while before you actually get that opportunity. But if you guys are curious about stuff, I'll just leave a link down in the description down below. You guys can check that out if you do want to know more about the Space Force. If not, that is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit that like button. That would be awesome. If you want to check out some more of my videos, hit the subscribe button. That would be even better. Hit the notification bell button if you really want to make my day. Follow me on Instagram and Snapchat if you haven't already. I hope you guys have an amazing freaking day, and I'll see y'all later.